Hey guys, this is Fergal from Poker VIP. Welcome back to part 2 of Fergal's top tips for poker success. Similar to part 1, we're going to be playing over on the anonymous tables over on GUTS Poker. We're going to be playing 3 tables at a time, and I'm just going to be talking you through my thought process as we go through it. So we're going to jump straight into the action here with the ace and the queen. And we have ace jack, which is likely going to be played as well. When it goes bet call, we're going to squeeze this up here. Mainly because there's just a lot of dead money out there. This guy is never going to be that strong, really. And if this guy folds, there's a decent chance this guy's going to fold. Unfortunately, he goes ahead and he calls. We opted to check the ace-queen here for deceptive purposes. We're going to go ahead and bet ourselves now. We're just going to bet 2 streets for value. Try to get paid by like pocket jacks, those types of hands. Just going to go for small value. We turn trips over here. We're going to bet it for value. This guy just rips it on us. Interesting. Don't think we can call here. We're going to have to let this one go. This guy pots, which is definitely concerning. We are going to call and see another street though. King is obviously a really good card for us because it reduces his king x combos. I mean, when he pots and then he checks back here, it just doesn't seem like he can have that much strength here ever. So I think we're going to go ahead and check and try to induce another bluff here if he was bluffing on the flop. He's got a pretty trivial call here. So he does have a king. I'm really surprised he decided to check back that king. I think he definitely cost himself a little bit of value there by not betting it, but hey, we'll take it. We'll make a little mental note on ourselves that this guy decides to pot bet with top pair, marginal kicker. So we're just going to have a quick chat while we have no hands on going about the few key points that we went through on part 1 and kind of what areas that we're going to be focusing on. So as I mentioned already, we're playing on the anonymous tables over on GUTS Poker. So what this means is that we have no HUD, we have no player names, so we can't really develop any reads or anything like that. If someone leaves and someone comes back in, they're just going to be classed as player 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So even if we do build a read, if they leave the table and someone else joins in, we just have another anonymous player. So we're not really going to be playing any sort of specific hands against specific opponents or anything like that. We're going to be focusing just on a fundamentally sound, should I say, strategy that will enable you to beat these games. So we're going to be focusing on 5 key areas. So the first of which is just playing solid pre-flop ranges. So what hands you should be opening, what hands you should be defending, all that sort of thing. Betting for value. So what hands that you should be betting, what hands you should be checking, pot controlling with, that kind of thing. Understanding your opponent's bets. So realizing what their bets mean on various board textures. And we'll kind of be going through a few examples of that then as the session goes on. Understanding relative hand strength, so how your hand strength will vary depending on the board texture. And last but not least, the positional play side of things. So how powerful positional play is and how you should be utilizing that. So this is a pretty damn good example here. So king 6, very, very raggedy hand, but we're getting 2 to 1 and we have position on our opponent. We could consider 3-betting here, but I flat a lot in these situations, blind versus blind. Purely because people play really, really badly out of position because, you know, it's really difficult to play well out of position. And there's just a huge amount of board textures that we can attack when our opponent shows weakness, basically. This board is particularly bad for us, so it's not a great example, but, you know, there's a lot of different board textures where we can float light, where we can raise light, and do all sorts of fun things. But on this particular board, when you just go ahead and bets, we are just going to let this one go. Something I touched off of, which I don't have included in my formal points, but touched off of in video 1 as well, is just kind of the mental game side of things. So in that situation, I mean, that king 6 call there, I am absolutely confident it will turn a profit long term. It didn't turn a profit that hand, so I'm not going to allow myself to get frustrated or anything like that, or start questioning my decisions, because I make my decision, I stand by it. I mean, sometimes I do, you know, everyone does some dumb things from time to time. But in general, if you have a rhyme and reason for what you're doing for every single situation, so if you understand what you're trying to accomplish and you go ahead and bet, even if it doesn't work out, the fact that you have a plan, that you thought through, that you realized you understood what you were trying to do, that's the fundamental side of things. If this guy just decides to limp ship it for the 21 euro, so we're going to have to fold here. So this is a pretty good example of what I was just talking about here. So this guy limps, so everyone's shown weakness so far. No one's shown any particular strength when I made my play. So we go ahead and we ISO with the hand. That's going to flop reasonably well. We're also going to be able to take this down pre-flop without a fight somewhat frequently as well, in which case we just pick up a couple of big blinds for free. This guy comes back over the top, so we're going to have to let it go. So we lose €1.20 there. But I'm not going to get worried about it because I know that my play was, in the long term, going to turn a profit. And it was just one of those times where we ran into somebody who was doing something weird where he decided to limp jam all in, which is obviously a very non-standard line. But as I said, it's not something I'm going to get stressed about. I know that I'm beating these games long term, and that's the only thing that really matters to me. So we'll keep on going, as they say. The queen and the 9, we are going to open here. This is about the bottom of my opening range. And happy enough to open here. This guy has posted his small blind. You should never post your blind. You should always just wait for the big blind to roll around. Anyone who does post is likely to be a recreational player. The fact that he's only posting a small blind isn't that big a deal. It means he gets an extra couple of hands in for only 10 cents, but it's still not a particularly good idea. Mainly because just if you're forced to put your money in the pot, it's impossible to turn a profit basically. I'm gonna check here. This guy has proven himself to be doing some kind of weird things here when he went for that limp raise, so we're gonna see if we can induce some bluffs out of him by showing a little bit of weakness. We don't love the 6. It's gonna slow him down a little bit with some of his range, with some of his bluffs, but we're not gonna be folding if he does decide to bet. We're just gonna check again here. If we bet here, our check call, check, and then our donk on the river, it just looks quite strong. Looks like we're going for value pretty damn frequently. So we're just going to check and see if we can get a bluff out of him. Unfortunately, we do not. And the ace-9 suited from the big blind, we are more than likely going to be defending. We'll see how the action unfolds around us though. Let's fold at the button. We get a walk. We were going to 3-bet the button and we were going to flat in position versus the small blind. Going back to our point about positional play. When the button opens, there's a much bigger incentive to take down the pot pre-flop. So by 3-betting that kind of hand, we can get him to fold a lot of hands that have like very reasonable equity against us. And the fact that even like if ace-9 is ahead of a hand, like let's say if he has a hand like, say if he's opening pretty wide and he has a hand like 4-5 even. We're obviously a pretty decent favorite against him, but he has the positional advantage against us. So it's going to be pretty damn tricky to turn any sort of substantial profit there long term. When we 3-bet though, we can get him to fold those hands that have equity, and we can take down a lot more pots post-flop because we have the betting initiative as well. We're going to go for a check call here on the ace-king tray board. When he double barrels, we're just going to go ahead and let this go. When he bets twice there, I don't envision him to be bluffing there too frequently. Sometimes we're getting bluffed off the best hand there, but not that often. Folding the flop is definitely too weak. I think he's going to shut down on the turn with a lot of his kind of bluffs, but unfortunately he does go ahead and fire the second barrel, so we're going to let our hand go. Pocket jacks on the button, definitely going to be a hand we're playing. We're going to bring it in for a 3-bet here for value versus the cutoff open. And 8-6, if it's folded to us, I'm happy to include this in my steal range, blind versus blind. It's a connected hand. It has some potential to flop okay if get called, and people are just seem to be overfolding to a fairly substantial degree in these games. We're just going to bet small here, mainly because if we check, we're showing weakness, and it's going to allow us to get bluffed off. We're not going to be check folding on the flop, but if we check, we're just going to allow him to take the betting initiative too easily, and he can just put us under so much pressure when we're out of position. And by betting, if we get him to fold any sort of hand that has overcards, it's an absolute result for us. This is 7, even though it gives us a flush draw, it's just an absolute disastrous card for us. He's got some flushes there for sure. He's got a lot more overpairs there. A lot of pairs that have connected. When he does call the flop, he's going to have a decent number of single pair hands and stuff like that. The 7 puts, as I said, some straights out there. It puts the flush out there. It's just not particularly good for us. So even though it does give us some additional equity, it's a very marginal amount of equity given the low flushes out there. So I'm happy with the way we played that, as I said, firing the small bet for the reason that we had, just to prevent us from getting exploited on later streets, basically. And we're going to be opening the king and the jack of the same suit. This guy 3-bets, so we would be defending here. And king 10, if it's folded to us on the button, we're going to bring it in for a raise. When under the gun goes ahead and opens, though, we're just going to throw our hand in the muck. The ace deuce here, if it is folded to the button, there is a reasonable chance we're going to end up playing this hand. We're going to incorporate this into our 3-bet bluff range here, big blind versus button. And he just snap folds, which we like. And we wake up with the ace and the king in the small blind immediately after, which we also approve of. Ace 5 from early position, we're just going to go ahead and stick it in the muck. Raggedy aces from early position don't play particularly well. And we have a very trivial 3-bet here versus a small button open. So we get 4-bet. I mean, I don't love getting 4-bet. I think our only option here is just to rip it, though. I don't like calling out of position. Seems like the only thing to do, really. He 4-bet folds, which we don't mind. We pick up a quarter of a stack uncontested. It's possibly we folded out some better hands, like some pocket pairs. It's not all that likely, though. But as I said, even if he has a hand like ace queen or ace jack there, he has like some equity against us for sure. And if we just flat call, we're going to miss the board a lot. So even though we have the best hand, we're probably not going to be favoured to win that pot if we just flat call, because there's just going to be so many boards he's going to be able to bluff us off on. So flatting is completely out of the question to me, so we just play it straightforward. I mean, it's never going to be a complete disaster getting in ace king free for, I think it was a little over 100 bigs, but not significantly so. I think he had like 21 euro or something like that. So it was like 105, somewhere between 105 and 110 bigs. So I mean, getting ace king there in pre-flop was never a disaster from late position, but wouldn't have been like, you know, incredibly good either. But we don't mind. The fact he's 4-bet folding is fantastic for us, obviously, because we pick up a relatively substantial pot without any risk whatsoever. And by no risk, I mean we didn't have to rely on our hand holding or anything like that. That's what I was getting at. So we're slowly but surely crawling our way back towards even. We definitely had a losing session in part 1, which is never fun. Especially when you're recording a video, it's very demoralizing getting off to a bad start. But this has been going a little bit better since then. Towards the end of part 1, we picked up some chips, and we're on the right track in this session so far as well. Queen Jack, we're going to be bringing it in from mid position. If this guy folds, fine by us. If he calls, that's also fine. If he 3-bets, we're not exactly loving life. We're just going to let our hand go. Fortunately, we don't have to make that decision though. And the 10 of the tray, obviously a very, very trivial fold. Be very interested to know what this gentleman went for the 4-bet fold with, because his 4-bet was absolutely huge. So, I mean, if he's going to be 4-bet folding, I think going that size is a big mistake. Because, I mean, if he can go cheaper there, and he's going to accomplish pretty much the same thing. If any of these guys call, we will definitely come along for the ride as well. We have a suited semi-connected hand. We flop a pair, but it's a pretty damn bad board for have a pair on. We're not going to be putting any more chippies here in here, should I say. This guy goes for the check call on this board. This guy bets again. I would expect him to have a value hand very, very frequently. I don't imagine he's going to be firing 2 streets on this board as a bluff that often. Like when this guy goes for the check call, like he's repping a showdown, like a middling showdown value hand, which he can definitely put under pressure with the double barrel, but it's I think this guy is going to be calling down relatively frequently when he decides to call flop. So we're going to flat the ace tray here because we just 3-bet this guy at the last orbit, so I don't want to be going too out of line with our 3-bets against him. And I mean, ace tray, it's going to perform reasonably well. I mean, he's gone for a really small size here, and this is a board texture like that just doesn't really make any sense for him to have hit that strongly. So I'm just going to go ahead and attack his weak sizing, and fortunately we were correct that time. And the ace-jack here, we're going to flat in position here, so going back to our 5th and most important point about playing good winning poker is just taking advantage of position. So we have a pretty good hand. I mean, I wouldn't completely despise a 3-bet here, but it just seems unnecessary when we can play pots in position. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fire here, and I mean, he's shown weakness here. We're going to bet, and we're going to bet on a lot of turns too. So this is one of them. We pick up a gut shot, and obviously this is an extra overcard if he has a hand like pocket 6s, 7s, 8s, anything like that. So we're going to go on the large side, and he goes for the check raise, which makes us very, very sad, but we're just going to go ahead and fold. We went large there to really encourage him to fold his middling pocket pairs, which I felt at the time was going to make up a fairly substantial portion of his range. I had like those kinds of middling pocket pair hands would make a lot of sense for his pre-flop raise followed by his flop check call. So those were the kinds of hands I was targeting with that sort of bet size, but unfortunately he saw through our ploy, or else he just had a very, very strong hand. Five and the 10 and the 10 and the 4, neither of them are particularly appealing to me, so we're just going to go ahead and stick both of them where they rightly belong, in the muck. The ace 5 suited though, we will bring it in for a raise unless the under the gun player decides to open first, in which case we just let our hand go. He doesn't, so we get to bring it in for a raise ourselves. Get flat called here. This guy is going to have some middling pocket pairs for sure, as well as some kind of middling strength Broadway hands like Jack Queen, Queen 10, those types of hands. We're going to elect for a check and a check call here if this guy bets. Provided he doesn't go enormous, which he doesn't. If he bets again, we are just going to let him have it. So now it's a question of whether we want to turn our hand into a bluff or not. I don't think we do. I think we have enough showdown value here that we're just going to check. And hopefully this just goes check, check. If he bets, we have a decision to make. Fortunately, we don't have to make it, so our showdown value proves to be enough. If he had bet there, it wouldn't really have made too much sense. Unfortunately, on the anonymous tables, you don't get any hand histories, so you can't actually check what your opponents had unless they show it down. So if you call them, you'll always see it. But if they call you, it's like kind of live rules where you don't get to see your opponent's hand, which I actually kind of like. I think it encourages people to make somewhat thinner calls because they know if they're wrong, they don't have to show down their hand. Which I think it definitely encourages people if they realize that that's the case. Of course, you're always kind of relying that people understand the software well enough to know that that's a thing. The Queen 7 suited, if it is folded to us, we're going to bring it in ourselves, and if there's any open before us, we're just going to let it go. The only exception would be if this guy raised and there was a few callers behind, we would just flip the chips in as well with our suited cards and see a flop. Obviously, when there's a 3-bet in front of us, it's an absolutely trivial fold. Not that we were thinking of continuing either way. The 9-7, again, if it's folded to us, we open. If anyone opens before us, we fold. So you'll notice there's a kind of a fairly common line that I'm saying, where is this hand, we're going to play it if we're the first to act. The reason being the first person into the pot has a huge amount of implied value, just because you'll take down the blinds really, really often when you're the first person to raise. So, but when someone else is raised, I mean, they're showing strength. So if you've got a hand like 9-7, it's very, very unlikely they're raising a worse hand than that. Now, obviously, we can use it as a 3-bet, and they're going to be raised folding a fairly large percentage of the time for sure. But 9-7 is just not a particularly great hand to be bringing into your 3-bet bluffing range. But my original point is that you being the first person in, it just gives you a really, really decent chance of picking up the pot uncontested. And it also means that you're going to see a lot of flops where you are the pre-flop aggressor, and because we're opening more in position, like in later position rather, we're going to be in position quite frequently post-flop, so we're going to be able to attack weaknesses from our opponents and so on. So pretty sick all in here. Ace-king suited versus the pocket kings, pretty standard. I didn't see exactly how the action went pre, but it's never going to be that big a deal getting ace-king suited. I mean, as I said earlier on, we went ahead and we 5-bet jammed our ace-king earlier. This was the guy, I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure if it was in this part of the video or the part 1, where he just, he limp jammed on us. So he limped, there was another limper behind, we ISO'd with, I think it was the king and the jack offsuit, and he just then ripped it. So I would have actually liked to have seen how that went down, because if there was a raise and he just decided to rip it with the ace-king suited, we know that his jams that is just his stupid overbet jams like that will be weighted towards the stronger hands. Whereas if it was just a pretty standard raise, re-raise, re-raise, etc., then we can't really make that extrapolation. The 7 and the jack, depending on what the action is, we may play it, but we're not going to be in love with it if we do. Versus a single early-ish position raise, we're just going to let it go. This is a hand that we will probably decide to play, though, with the king and the queen. Because we have a lot of blockers in our hands, we block a lot of people's strong broadways and strong pocket pairs, we may elect to use this as a 3-bet bluff if it is a late position open. So from the cutoff, that constitutes a late position to me, so if this guy folds, or if he calls, we are going to put in the squeeze, or a 3-bet effectively. So we just call. This is actually good for us because there's just some extra dead money here where this guy hasn't shown too much strength. So we're going to put in the what's called a squeeze play, and hopefully, I mean, if we just take this down without a fight pre, it's a great result for us. This guy does go ahead and calls, and this guy sticks around as well, which is not very good for us. So we are going to bet here. And we're going to fire on a decent number of turn cards if we get called. The 10 is not one of my favorite ones, but we are going to fire on it. Mainly because it just puts his kind of marginal pocket pairs under so much pressure. So we've just shown, our hand just looks so incredibly nutted when we take this line. Sorry, excuse me. So, I'm going to have a little bit of a chat about my thought process for this one, because I think it's a pretty interesting hand. So, when he just flat calls there and then calls the squeeze, the only hand that I'm really afraid of is exactly pocket 8s. But he will show us some hands, like a decent number of hands, like pocket 6s, 7s, that sort of middling strength pocket pair, that kind of thing. So, it makes sense for him to call a single flop bet with that kind of hand, because obviously all of our ace kings or ace queens and stuff like that have missed. But calling a second barrel with that type of hand when it just looks like I'm going to be jamming like essentially every single river is really, really unappetizing for him. So I think we put that part of his range under an incredibly large amount of pressure, and that's what we were going for there. So fortunately it worked out. And we have an ace and a queen, which we are going to go for a similar enough spot as with the squeeze play. Unfortunately, we don't have position on either of these players now, so if they do call, we have to play out of position. But hey, we can't have it all, right? we are going to fire once here. We have overs and we have a gut shot, and we have a fairly uncapped range here. We can have all of the top sets. And he just goes ahead and he folds. We would have turned top pair, which would have been a pretty damn good card for us. But fortunately, we take it down the flop, which is really what we wanted when we c-bet there. Again, we fold out all of his low pocket pairs there that haven't improved to a set on that board, and so, yeah. So a few interesting spots that have arisen there in the last little while. I am almost positive we are at least back to break even for the two videos now, which obviously isn't what we're looking for when we're recording videos. We definitely want profit, but hey, when you get off to a bad start, you'll definitely take digging yourself out of that hole. It's always a satisfying feeling in poker, even though it wasn't that big a hole to begin with, of course. 5 and the queen. Nothing we're going to be able to do there, unfortunately. Nor with the king and the 5. Again, if we were in later position there, we can definitely consider opening that. Going back to the positional play that I have been harping on so much about, but it really is, especially if you're starting out new in poker. The power of position is just something. It's just a concept that you have to ingrain into your head. It accounts for so much of your win rate. If you use any kind of tracking software and you've got any sort of substantial sample, you'll notice a really, really obvious trend of the closer you are to the button, the more money you're making. And obviously in the blinds, nobody's winning money because it's not possible, because you're forced to put money in and you have the worst position post-flop as well. But yeah, like from early position through the button, you'll just see a really, really linear increase in how many big blinds you're winning for every 100 hands in that position, and provided you get a big enough sample, of course. I mean, obviously, it's gonna be a huge amount of variance in it, so you do need a big sample to see your kind of true win rate, or your close approximation to your true win rate from those positions. But if anyone does have a reasonable sample, you should be able to see it relatively quickly, barring any kind of weird anomalies. The 10 and the 2, we are never going to be opening here. I'm going to mix it up here with the suited connectors from early position. This is a hand I won't always open, but it is something I do with some degree of frequency. So if we get a couple of callers, we don't mind at all. If we take down the blinds, we're very happy with that. And if we get 3-bet, we're pretty sad. The deuce and the tray, nothing we're going to be able to defend with there, unfortunately. I mean, this just smashed our under the gun opening range really, really hard, so we are absolutely going to be c-betting this board, and if he continues, we are 100% done with that. So he just snap folds, which is fantastic for us. But that's just board, as I said, like any sort of standard opening range will, from under the gun, will have hit that board really, really hard on average. So obviously that was a spot where it didn't hit us that hard at all, but you know, if you look at all of the hands that we're opening there, it does connect really, really strongly with us. So you should always be looking to play versus your opponent's range, not kind of one specific hand you think is part of that range, but your overall opponent's range. So the combination of all of the hands that they can have. This is a bad call. I didn't actually realize this guy was so short stacked, so this was definitely a mistake. We don't have the correct implied odds to be making this call versus this guy, but hopefully we get away with it. That was just me being lazy and not checking the variables enough. We've made the bad call though. This guy has shown weakness, so we're just going to fire a one and done bet here, see if we can get this guy to fold. No need to go large at all here. If he has a hand he's going to fold, I think he's going to fold to any reasonable sizing, so he does. We get away with it, but as I said, that was definitely not a correct call on my part. If I had seen all of the information available to me, I wouldn't have made it. But I mean, we turned a profit that time with it, but in the long run, we're not going to be winning money there. So it was not a particularly strong part of me. So never. But as it kind of really shows the importance of really paying attention to every single piece of information that you have at the table. So even switching off just for 2 seconds like that, where you make one bad call, it's not going to be a disaster of a call, but it's not going to be winning. And we want to be making every single play because it's going to make us money. So if we recognize a spot where we do something that's not going to make us money long term, that's something you need to cut out of your game. Pocket trays, we're going to be bringing it in for an open. If player tray opens, we would be happy to flat and try to encourage some multi-way action. We have hit 2 sets with 3s so far this session. I think both of them were in part 1, one of which we won and one of which we lost. So let's see if we can flop a third and win a substantial pot this time. That is just a disaster of a flop. We are not going to be c-betting. This board has hit our, going back to talk of ranges, this board has hit our opponent's flat calling range here way harder than our early position opening raise. This is just going from bad to worse. We are finished with this hand. Sometimes we have the best hand, so if we get to if we just get to check it down versus a hand like, you know, ace jack, ace queen, anything like that, we're pretty thrilled. But we're going to have the worst hand here pretty frequently, and yeah, I don't expect to get this to showdown too often. Interesting king. Let's just hope he has the ace jack and decides to check it back. We'll take it. We'll take it. Okay, so that is going to wrap up the session. Thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, if you have any questions, comments about any of the hands, feel free to leave them in the comment section of the relevant social media. I always check them periodically. You can also message me directly over in the Poker VIP forums, etc. And I will be back soon for parts 3 and 4. I hope you enjoyed watching. Take care, guys.